Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So, as we are continuing our unit here on the revolutionary mindset, America just got our independence from England. Now, we got to figure out what we're going to do, because we don't want to create a government the way it has already been done. We don't think there is currently an effective government style that we want to adopt. So America is just going to make a brand new government out of thin air. And while it'd be great to say we get it right on the first try, the first try doesn't go great. And today we're going to talk about the first try in detail, called the Articles of Confederation. Let's go ahead and get started. So this here is George Washington. Today we're going to be talking about the Articles of Confederation. While the Articles of Confederation get created, George Washington here, who will eventually be the first president of the United States, isn't really involved in this. He's busy fighting England in the Revolutionary War. So, the Articles of Confederation get created very quickly once America declares their independence. We needed a government. The Articles of Confederation is the name of our government that we are going to roll with. All right, so the Articles of Confederation was a rejection of the way England had done things. So England had a king. We're our own country now, blank slate. So America, we don't know what we want, but we know what we don't want. And the main thing that we don't want is a big central government, because that's like having a king. That's bad. We're going to try something that's never been done before. It has been attempted pretty successfully, though they both had a vicious collapse historically, with the way we're going to run our government, and we're going to call it a representative democracy. So, trying to figure out how to present those without overloading you with information to keep it simple. All right. Democracy had been done before, right? On small scales, it's really effective. You saw a lot of America had already tried the House of Burgesses, which was in Virginia when the colonies got set up. Even the Mayflower Compact, when the Puritans and Pilgrims had shown up, they basically agreed, majority rules. So democracy was already kind of a natural pull for a lot of the colonists and now the Americans. The problem is, on large scale, democracy hasn't always been super successful. The best example of this is Greece, Greece existed for a really, really long time and was very powerful for a really long time. The problem is, when your society gets too big, democracy can turn into mob rule. There's a famous philosopher named Socrates, who basically was executed, drank hemlock. He was executed because basically the people in power didn't like him. And it was done through the democratic process. After that, Plato and the followers of Socrates, who were very influential, were very critical of democracy and kind of led to the downfall of democracy. So for 2,000 years at this point, when they're going to create a new government, there hasn't been a democracy, because the one big attempt at it had turned into more or less mob rule. And that's really bad when you get a big population. So having just a straight up democracy, not a big fan of that. The next one that the United States is going to look at is Rome. So Rome had a republic. All right. So you had a handful of people who ran a lot of stuff. Now the people voted for who got to make those decisions. So it's better than a democracy. But the problem with Rome is basically whoever got to be those elected officials, it was a very elite group. So you basically had to choose between a very elite class of people on who got to run the country. It couldn't just be anybody. So America is going to take this idea of a republic, which was Rome, and the democracy, that is Greece, and create a democratic republic. It's the first time this is really going to be done. So in a direct democracy, all right, everybody votes for everything. Everybody votes on every law, on all of that. That's what was done in Greece, turned into mob rule. In America, they're going to try a representative democracy, which means all the people vote for elected representatives, right? And those elected representatives are going to make laws, all right? There's very little requirements to who can be the elected representative. That is very different from Rome. So from the beginning, the Articles of Confederation take in these ideals, which are very present in the second attempt, which is our current Constitution today. So this, by all means, is a huge success, looking back on it, with the Articles of Confederation of having a representative democracy. Another win, all right, let's build them up a little bit here, is the concept of popular sovereignty. That is a huge part of this first government, which is that the government is run by the people. All right, so the people have control of the government, not the other way around, not like England, because nobody wants to be like England. That's a big no-no. The people run the government, so therefore, since the people run the government, the people have to have the right to vote, and that is popular sovereignty, like the control by the people, popular sovereignty. So in Pennsylvania, very quickly after we have a Declaration of Independence, we realized we're obviously no longer going to function with the English government. So we had to turn around and we created the Articles of Confederation, kind of rushed it together. The main thing with the Articles of Confederation is we did not want it to be like England. So we all signed it, made it all look nice and fancy here about the Articles of Confederation. And the big thing that we're going to talk about, which will end up being a downside, is America knew more what we didn't want than what we did want. America did not want a big government. Thomas Jefferson, very clear on that, and he keeps this mindset for quite a bit. Here it says, my reading of history convinces me that most bad government results from too much government. So he thinks big government's bad, and a lot of other people do too. Now, if that seems boring to you, maybe you will understand better in meme format. So, the American people did not want a strong central government. Absolutely not. The biggest fear of the American people after you declare independence from England is to have a big, powerful government that can tell you what to do and make you do things against your will, like all the issues that we had as Americans with Britain. Absolutely, viciously do not want it. That is the greatest horror of everybody. So because of that, and we didn't want a strong central government, we don't have one. The Articles of Confederation gave all the power to the states. There's 13 states. There were 13 colonies. There's 13 states. The states have all the power. There is technically, I guess, a federal government. All they can do is ask, like, hey guys, can I have some money? No. Okay. Like, there's no central government. They have no say-so in anything. We go the complete opposite of having like a monarch to nothing. Terrified of a central government. So we're not going to have one. That is where the problems are going to come in. When you don't have any central government, it can get weird pretty quick. So the question here is, what are some of the things that everyone could agree on the new government in America needed? So basically what we talked about, what was the mindset of the people at the time? So pause me, answer that completely, and we're going to move on. All right, so the Articles of Confederation, our very first government, spoiler alert, is going to last 10 years. And it probably should not have lasted that long. Catastrophic problems with it. There is a bunch of good stuff in it. A lot of that good stuff, representative democracy, democratic republic, that stuff absolutely is going to, and in our second attempt, the one we get right, the Constitution, that gets carried over. There's some major problems with the Articles of Confederation, and the main issues is what got left out. The main thing is how weak the federal government is. So, France. This is Paris, France. All right. So I got some random pictures here because it's kind of abstract concepts that we got to talk about, and there's not a great picture. It's better than looking at words on the screen. So this is Paris. France is important here. The reason we're going to win the Revolutionary War, not only does France fight England at the same time, so England is more concerned with France than they ever were with us. France loans us a bunch of money, like a ton of money at the time. For simplicity's sake, I want to simplify these numbers so that it makes sense. All right? We will say, and it was more than this, but we will say at the end of the Revolutionary War, we, America, owe France $13 million. So we owe France $13 million. All right? Well, how are you going to pay France? Well, with money? Yeah. Well, how do you get money? So how does the government get money? Well, they tax people. Tax is how the government gets money. All right? So the government says, hey, you owe taxes. They take money from the people. They pay off debts and for the greater good of the people. All right? The problem with the Articles of Confederation, though, is that Congress, if there even was one, is more or less non-existent, couldn't tax. There was no taxing of the American people by the federal government. Now, that doesn't mean taxes didn't exist. Taxes absolutely existed. And so they're like, oh, we owe taxes. How are we going to do that? Federal government's like, oh, I can't do anything. Like, yeah, I know. Sit down. Be quiet. We don't like you. Big government, bad government. Bad. So there were 13 states. We owed $13 million. Everybody just pays $1 million. Raise your $1 million. Send it over to France. We'll be good. So it was each state's individual responsibility to pay back their $1 million. That is a ton of money. Some states really took this seriously and fought very hard to pay back their debt as soon as possible. 2 of the 13 states actually do that relatively quickly. All right? And they're not rich states. The 2 states that are able to do it is North Carolina and this other state here. Think about it, because that's Rhode Island. And the reason that Paul's like that is I was like, oh, I know North Carolina and Rhode Island. I know that. So put a picture of North Carolina flag up here, and I was like, what does Rhode Island's flag look like? This is Rhode Island's flag. So I'm sorry to anybody that lives in Rhode Island. What? That's the best you could come up. Whatever. I'm not gonna throw stones. Anyway, and we threw a little map up here of how itty bitty Rhode Island's itty bitty little state, tiny itty bitty state. Anyway, North Carolina and Rhode Island both pay back their debt to France. They pay them $1 million. So how does North Carolina and Rhode Island get money? They tax the bejesus out of the people inside North Carolina and Rhode Island. So the people in North Carolina and Rhode Island are like being taxed to death. Like Virginia, as an example, which is just above North Carolina, doesn't tax like anything at all. They're like, nah, we'll deal with it later. So the people in Virginia have a lot more money because they're not being taxed than the people in North Carolina. This causes a weird relationship between Virginia and North Carolina where basically the rich guy, Virginia, is pretty mean to North Carolina, would hire North Carolinians to do like work for way less than the Virginians. And there ends up being some tension between North Carolina and Virginia because Virginia has more money than North Carolina because Virginia isn't taxing their people. The reason that is a problem. So here on this super simple map, the little light blue area, literally has an arrow to it, says original 13 states. All right. So this is how the world views America at the time, is that little blue chunk. So sure, North Carolina paid back their debt and Rhode Island paid back their debt. But if Virginia doesn't pay back their debt to France, and South Carolina doesn't, and New York doesn't, if they don't pay back their debt to France, and France decides we're going to come get our money, they could come over here and invade America and take it over. I mean, that's an extreme example, but that could happen. Are they just going to take over the states that didn't pay them back? No. They're going to take over all of America, all of the United States of America. Because that's who owes the money, not individual states. So like, oh gosh, like I gotta make sure I pay them back, because what happens if France invades us? Well, we're gonna fight. Who's we? Because that brings us to the second problem with the Articles of Confederation. Not only can the Articles of Confederation not tax on a federal level, which already causes issues between North Carolina and Virginia, it also doesn't have an army, which is crazy to me because, like, at the Second Continental Congress, one of the first things they do is created like a federal continental army for George Washington, and then the first government's like, I'm sure we don't need that ever again. We'll never, So it's not that there wasn't a military. It was just state by state had their own individual militaries, their own individual militias. The reason that's important, all right, is because obviously you need a militia in order to defend yourself. But it would be something catastrophic for all the states to come together and put their armies in one. But people aren't thinking that far ahead. Remember, just evil big government. They don't want the government to run no army. They don't want it to be able to tax people because they can see what a corrupt government can do. But without having an army, so if France does invade us, there's nothing we can do to defend ourselves. Like if they invade North Carolina, who's the only one that's going to fight France? It's North Carolina. Virginia and South Carolina didn't invade us. We'll be all right. And then they can just go state by state by state and take you over one at a time. That's like worst case scenario. People see that there are these two catastrophic problems with the Articles of Confederation with ineffective taxing, all right, or the inability to tax at all, really, at a federal level, and then no central government, no central military. That is massive issues. So the smart people at the time already knew that this was an issue, all right, and that it needs to be remedied before it gets out of hand. But the question here is, name the two problems with the Article of Confederation and why are these major issues for a society and for a new country. So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So there's a sign that change was needed. The smart people, your Thomas Jeffersons, Alexander Hamiltons, your John Adams, the smart people realize, oh, we might have messed this up. Like we might not, yes, big government, terrifying, but it's got to be able to do some stuff. So they're like, hey guys, we all need to get together and talk about this because we needed to fix it. And they agree, all the smart people. Then in 1786, so this is 9 years, or 1776 is the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This is 10 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Articles of Confederation was 1777, so 9 years after the Articles of Confederation. 9 years, we realize there's enough problems. We need to show up and talk about this and fix some stuff. So they're going to show up and they're going to meet here in Annapolis, Maryland. All right, at this building, and they're all going to get together and they're going to figure out how to fix these Articles of Confederation before anything weird happens. Here's the problem. In order for anything to get fixed in the Articles of Confederation, 9 of the 13 states have to agree to fix it, to change it, to make an amendment to it. All right? Only 5 states showed up. You can't really fix anything if not enough states to show up can even vote. So even if all 5 agreed on it, they couldn't change anything because you have to have the 9 to do anything. So they're like, oh, dang. Now, people are showing up horse and wagon across the country at the time. There's not even trains yet. So when they get in, they're like, oh, shucks. And they're like, well, we still need to fix this. They're like, I agree. And they're like, all right, well, tell you what, for next year, for real, we are going to meet next year in Philadelphia, and it'll be 1787. We're going to for real show up and fix it then. Everybody's like, oh, okay, sure. And everybody leaves. Now, technically, there is a date set for the following year in the summer in Philadelphia in 1787. But nobody showed up at Annapolis. There's no way they're going to show up now in Philadelphia the following year unless something crazy happens in the winter between this summer of 1786 and the summer of 1787 that changes everybody's view drastically over the need to fix the government. Lucky for you, there is, and it's an awesome story. The question here, though, before we get there, why did nothing get fixed at the Annapolis meeting in 1786? So I talked about that. Pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. All right, Shays Rebellion. All right, so let me just get here to some pictures. This here, Daniel Shay, painting of Daniel Shay. They didn't have cameras in the 1700s. Massachusetts, the same state where Boston exists. And we've talked a lot about Boston. People in Massachusetts in general definitely willing to fight when they feel like they're wronged at this time period. As we've seen, most of our stories are coming out of Boston, which is in the state of Massachusetts. So this is more the rural area of Massachusetts. So Maryland, for whatever reason, Massachusetts had not been paying their taxes back to France for whatever reason. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, we have to pay our taxes back. So the state legislature of Massachusetts demands their money immediately, and they demand their money from the rich people, because that's who has money and that can give it to you. Now, the rich people didn't just take their money and like keep it and just count it every night. Like, look at all my money. Rich people typically invest their money. The easiest way of investing your money, if you're a wealthy person back in the 1700s, is you give loans to poor people to buy farms. Because those poor people will take your money, they'll buy a farm, and then they will pay you back plus interest over time as they make money off their crops. This is how most of the rich people were making money in Massachusetts. Now all of a sudden they have to pay tons of actual cash to the government, cash they don't actually have because it's with all the poor farmers. So all the rich people go out to the poor farmers and demand they give them the money. The poor farmers are like, what? No, I don't have this money. What are you talking about? I have a farm. So what the rich people did was take the farm from the poor people. Now technically the rich people own the farm since they paid for it, right? That's how loans work. They take the farm, kick everybody off their farm, then they sell it for next to nothing, I guess, to get their money so they can pay their taxes so they don't go to jail. So who got absolutely like the raw end of this deal was the poor people, the farmers. Here's where it starts getting a little weird though. The farmers are also the militia. Because that's right, there is no federal military, so the farmers are also the militia. Enter Daniel Shay, who is a farmer who lost his farm in this exact situation. Daniel Shay was a Revolutionary War hero in the region. So he was already well known. When he loses his farm, he very quickly gathers a lot of the local farmers that were in the same situation that were also very angry. And they're going to do something about it. So they're the militia, they're the power in the region, and they're all basically homeless. So he organizes them and go marching to the courthouse in their local town. When they get to the courthouse, I don't know if they had a plan when they got there, but they got to the courthouse. And when they got to the courthouse, they took it over. They just said, we run the courthouse now. And who's going to stand up to them? They're the military in the region. So they now take over the courthouse and effectively take over their town. Nobody comes to stop them. This doesn't stop them from being angry. So what ends up happening is they kind of terrorize the local area. They'll just go around and attack rich people and like beat them up. There was, people got murdered. People got killed in this. Rich people would get drug out of their houses and beat to death by an angry mob in front of their family. It got real. They started taking over other towns. Again, they're the militia. Who's going to stop them? If this happened today, the military would show up or the police would show up. They are those things. He just starts taking over more and more in the winter of 1786. And it kind of catches him off guard that he really thought there would be like a battle. And there wasn't. So Daniel Shay just owns multiple towns. Which is crazy to think about, but that would never happen in today's society because we have a federal government that has a federal military, and the whole reason he was upset is he was being unfairly taxed, which is something that doesn't happen with the federal government that tax everybody equally. So what ends up happening, all right, is in this January of 1787, because it's from 1786 to 1787, but it's really only like 2 months, that he starts spreading out into other states. I don't know if he actually has a plan or not. Once he starts flirting with taking over other states and other areas, multiple states come together and they get a militia together and they are effectively able to shut down Shays' rebellion, and Daniel Shay himself is killed. There is a monument here in the New England region. It says the last battle of Shays' Rebellion was here, February 27, 1787, because Shays' Rebellion is extremely important. This man just started taking over places. Keep in mind, this is the terror, getting taken over by somebody and being forced to do something you don't want to. That's just like having a king. That's terrifying to the American people that this could happen. And in less than 10 years of our new government, the Articles of Confederation working, it becomes obvious. Having no federal government is a problem, and we're going to have to start over on the government. Luckily, there's already a date in the books for everybody to meet and talk about this, which is going to be the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia. So while when that date was set the previous summer, it looked like nobody was going to show up because nobody showed up to Annapolis. Why would they show up now? Daniel Shays showed the two major weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation: unfair taxing practices, which made him angry, and no federal military. Absolutely shined a light on these glaring issues that must be resolved if our new country stands any chance of survival. So the question here is, why is Shays' Rebellion so important in American history? How did it change the views of the American people on the problems with the Articles of Confederation? So answer that completely. I'll see you guys tomorrow.